there can be a trap in recovery of, I didn't do a thorough enough step 4. Was it moral enough? Was it searching enough? We have some colorful adjectives in recovery, and I think we would be better off without them.
Bill Wilson, co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, wrote in 1952, "If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root some unhealthy dependence and its consequent demand." Wilson suggested that if we could identify and continually surrender these unrealistic and unrealizable demands, that we may then be able to accomplish what he imagined to be the recovery's next frontier, something he called emotional sobriety. Flash forward 70 years and join psychotherapists and best-selling authors Tom Rutledge and Dr. Alan Berger, who have taken up the mantle of exploring Bill Wilson's new frontier. Welcome to Emotional Sobriety.
Welcome to Emotional Sobriety, the podcast. I'm Tom Rutledge, and with me, I'll turn it right over to you, Dr. Berger. Dr. Alan Berger's with me. You've brought a guest today.
This is Bring Your Guest Sunday.
I didn't know. I didn't know.
Yeah, no, we're going to start doing just what they do in kindergarten, right? You bring your favorite stuffed animal. Well, Joe is not a stuffed animal, so he's going to speak for himself and talk. But Joe, welcome to the show, by the way, Joe. And I'm so glad you're here to join us today.
Yeah, long-time listener, first-time guest.
That's what we like. And now hopefully you'll turn into a long-term guest as well as a long-term listener.
Yeah.
Because it's great to have you here, man. I've respected your work since you and I started doing some of these workshops together on emotional sobriety through Free Thinkers and John R. over in Arizona, our buddy. And with Maria, I mean, we've had some great workshops, and we'll refer people to those so they can go listen to them later on. And we'll get Patrick the information so we can put them in the notes.
Okay, but before we go any farther, I want you to say, Alan, I want you to say Free Thinkers 3 times fast.
Free Thinkers. Early Sunday morning, and I stayed up late watching this wonderful heavyweight fight last night. Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, man, the third in the trilogy, and it was almost as good as the Hobbits books and Foundation trilogy and the Dune trilogy. I mean, it was just... It was an amazing fight last night. So, but look, I want to focus on having you here, Joe, because you do so many wonderful things. I mean, tell everybody about your work and your show, your podcast, and also your book.
Okay, so I've got this sort of publishing arm called Rebellion Dogs Publishing. And you probably know where that line comes from, right? Rebellion dogs are every step at first. And I didn't steal it first. I was in a sober band in the 80s with the mother of my son and some sponsees of mine and a sponsee of hers. We had this band. And Kathy was the creative genius of the band, I call her. And she wrote a song called Rebellion Dogs about sort of waking up in the morning and the dogs are barking and looking outside the window and it looks safe. So she runs outside, but they're biting at her heels. It was just a wonderful song about turning the verb into a noun and the noun into a verb. And, it just, we all love beautiful songwriting, right?
And playing with words is fun.
Yeah. It sure is. Yeah. So that was sort of with me for a long time. And I was talking about it last night. There's a certain zeitgeist. There's a podcast called Rebellion Dogs, and some 12-step groups are called Rebellion Dogs. And so it's not, I didn't invent the idea, but I sure it resonates with me. It explains what I'm trying to do. I want to be critical and loyal, right? Like being critical of the sort of AA dogma or the current way of doing things in treatment and addiction and mental health isn't like being a cynic. It's just asking, like a child would do, well, why? And something sort of mentor in recovery would say, and I borrowed this from him, was what else could this mean? When I've come to this conclusion that I'm so smart, I've got it all figured out now.
Mhm.
What else could this mean? And sometimes we can see it through another way by reading somebody else's book or listening to somebody else's podcast or hearing someone else's story. And so Rebellion Dogs came from sort of the ethos or zeitgeist of, my life in recovery. And I'm constantly changing. I'm evolving, right? I got sober in Montreal, which is a very Euro kind of city, very je ne sais quoi, joie de vivre kind of spirit. And so they sort of viewed anything American, not with anything that would even resemble contempt, but, well, that's those Americans, right? So they didn't take the big book literally. They didn't take AA literally.
Mhm.
They didn't take themselves too seriously. They gleaned what they could and needed from it, but just in their own sort of unique way. And then I moved to Calgary, which was sort of a Midwest city, so that was a more conservative, different culture. The meetings were different, and I had to learn to adjust to that. And then I moved to Toronto, and you would think Toronto, a Northeast city, is a very liberal city. It is. It's the most multicultural city in North America. Although Houston, I'm very impressed with. I spent some time there at a NADAC conference. And, but Toronto has kind of a Midwest 12-step recovery kind of, like they sort of bought into some of the buy the book, let's make AA great again. Fundamentalism is too strong and too poisoned a word to say, but that kind of literal interpretation and that kind of tough love sort of thing. So when I was exposed to that, I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy in AA with people repeating cliches like, back then it was Star Trek Next Generation, the whole idea of the Borg, right, being assimilated. And it felt like that, right? And I wasn't having any part of it. So I had a band in AA, which was an outlet for creativity. And eventually I went looking for a secular daily reflection book because I enjoyed all of the tools of early sobriety, Grapevine and NA had some good literature, AA had some good literature, but it was always with the primacy of a theistic worldview, the idea of sobriety granting prayer answering type of higher power, which I didn't believe in, which I accepted
Right.
as a belief structure that was helping people, and I didn't want to denounce it, but I couldn't speak that language and be authentic. So there was the great rub, right? Am I going to say the words that give me the approval that I crave, or am I going to be authentic and maintain the integrity that I need to survive in sobriety? What a balancing act. And so I went looking for a non-theistic secular daily reflection book, couldn't find it, complained, in this day and age, it's the 21st century, for crying out loud. And people said, well, eventually they listened, but they said, Joe, you've been sober long enough. You are a writer. If someone had written that, what would they look like? Why don't you do it? And I said, well, I can't because, and I thought I would have an end of the sentence when I got to the middle of the sentence.
You didn't.
And I sort of walked it back, and I said, okay, let me just see what I can do. Right. And so I wrote a daily reflection book that was the first secular daily reflection book called Beyond Belief, Agnostic Musings for 12-Step Life. And it seemed overwhelming, right? 365 ideas.
Mhm.
No way. But I thought, okay, like back then I'd been sober 35 years. And I thought, well, I probably heard 10 good ideas every year. That's easy. 10 good ideas every year, right? Okay, what are they, right? And so, and things I've heard, and I started writing them down, and I started collecting sayings and quotes, and looking back at the books that had been referred to me through my recovery career, and and when I got to 200, I thought I'll never make it, and when I got to 300, I thought, why do I have to stop at 365? And
Right.
you end up with 500 and find the 365 that are most cohesive. It's like writing an album, right?
Mhm.
You write 20 songs or 25 songs to put out 8 songs, and it just works that way. So that was sort of what I did. And from that, like it just, while I'm doing that, why don't I do a podcast? And while I'm doing that, I got invited to write an article for The Fix, and so I wrote under a pseudonym for them, so yeah, and I've done that. I joined NADAC and started putting in everyday recovery people terms what's going on in the science and the administrative process of the whole treatment and recovery industry, just plain language. I just acting like a reporter, not an expert. And I like that. And I did a music podcast, over 650 episodes of, indie artists. And, sort of I honed my skills there, learning to, talk to people and, draw them out and get interesting things out of them. And I just been applying that to people in the recovery community. And the other thing I learned in music is, if you are wanting to talk to the greatest managers and the greatest promoters in the business, and you have an indie band no one's ever heard of, they don't have time for you. But if you come with a microphone, say, I've got a radio show and I want your expertise, oh, I'll let my secretary book you some time at my place or yours, right? It's a whole different thing. So I found that was a door opener, having a vehicle to help promote other people's ideas. And, so that's kind of what I do. That's kind of what my book was. That's kind of what my radio show is. That's kind of, I see my little role in this whole community.
It takes me all the way back. It's a random thought, but it takes me all the way back to Napoleon Hill in his book Think and Grow Rich. Back in the early part of the last century is where it was, one of the things that was always a takeaway from things that he wrote was he always talked about helping other people.
Yeah.
When in doubt, help somebody else.
Yeah.
When you're stuck, when you're in that impasse of your own creativity, go help somebody else succeed. It's like, I always loved that. And I'm always, he's not the only one who's ever said anything like that, but I have attributed that to him, because that's first place I ever heard it. So that sounds like a lot of what you've been doing.
Yeah. And you can walk in any direction to find someone who needs help.
Yes.
Another random question. Was your love of music something you discovered in sobriety, or was that something that preceded your sobriety date that you then had to?
It absolutely preceded sobriety date. When my son was a teenager, his friends thought I was deity-like because I saw Led Zeppelin. The truth of the matter was, I was at Led Zeppelin, but I was on window pane acid and don't remember a single coherent moment of it.
You didn't see a thing.
No, he saw a lot, but it wasn't Led Zeppelin.
Right. Nothing.
That's right. He saw a ton, but it wasn't Led Zeppelin.
I had a great show, and but there's no bootlegs of what I saw, and so I always loved music, and it was my solace when I felt so alone and so hopeless. I affectionately call myself an emotional retard. I'm pretty good jousting intellectually, emotionally. I struggle a little more. Give me that wheel again. What's that word? Oh yeah. Sad, glad, mad. Well, I guess I am mad. And so music really helped me sort of express that and feel it and sense it and identify it. And, in sobriety, I needed to, something to do with all of that extra time. And I went back to sort of guitar and, doodling a little bit and a little bit of songwriting and that kind of stuff. And it was part of community, right? One of the books I read talks about a sort of social capital term called CHIME. And it's where you see success, you find connection, hope, identity, meaning, and empowerment. Those are the acronym CHIME, right? So community comes first, right? And so I needed a community, but not just a bunch of people smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee, because I was a young guy in sobriety. So I found people who also liked music and sort of collaborated with them. And a lot of projects didn't go anywhere, and others did, for sure.
Well, it's great having you here, Joe. Look, one of the things we've been doing with our show recently is we've been kind of, methodically going through my new book. And one of the upcoming chapters is going to be on perfection. And, when I thought of inviting you to join us, it was about this concept that you've been bringing to the workshops that you and I have done with John and Maria on emotional sobriety, and this sober enough idea and perfectionism. And could you spend a few minutes sharing with our listeners your ideas about that?
Sure. The first thing, again, something I learned, and I can't even remember from who now, is instead of fighting the darkness, shine the light. And the whole idea of fighting perfection, the dragon of perfection, the fight's never over. You can't get onto the next thing on your to-do list, because I'll never be done fighting my perfection. So what is the version of shining the light? Well, some things don't require perfection. Like, I can be sober enough and be a good member of my community, a good employee, a good father, a good AA member. And so, that became sort of a mantra for me. And I found it made me more productive, because, at the root of this sort of perfection is this fear of failure that I have, and this expectation I have of what I think other people require of me in order to have their approval. And none of those things are true, of course. They're all illusionary, but they drive me. And there can be a trap in recovery of, I didn't do a thorough enough step 4. Was it moral enough? Was it searching enough? We have some colorful adjectives in recovery, and I think we would be better off without them, like rigorous honesty. Outside of a recovery community, that's the only kind of honesty there is.
That's hilarious.
Hey, Joe, that is so good, man. That is so true. Yeah, you wouldn't put it together. It's like that is what honesty is, right? It's being radical with you.
Well, you think about that, and language is so funny anyway, because people will say, like, all right, I'm going to be completely honest with you. And you go like, okay, what have you been so far? I've known this person 4 years. We've been doing therapy. Well, now you're going to like, what?
Exactly. And so, trying to get, like the opposite of perfection. What's that? I'm still focused on this fighting the darkness approach, and, doing like the steps, for instance. Why work the steps? Well, only if after you get sober, things get worse. And that was the case for me. Like, sobriety didn't solve my problems. It exposed them. And I needed to do more. But I see good examples in AA of people who got sober and everything got better. Socioeconomic things got better. Their relationships just worked themselves out. They naturally found their equilibrium. And, so they're not like 12-step workers, although they're part of a 12-step program. So why should they, do the steps again, let alone do them at all? But I needed something to just sort of explore what was really going on with me. But you can do that forever and not get on with your life. And I still have examples of it in my life today. I'll give you one. I thought about, okay, I want to do an audiobook because someone asked me, hey, Joe, I love audiobooks. How come you don't have an audiobook? And I thought, okay, well, I've got all of these people I quote. Wouldn't it be really cool if I got them to do the audio on whatever they're quoting? Well, that's a big job, right? So, okay. And what about if I had sort of a male British voice and a female American voice and my voice, if that's what they wanted? And, like I just made it this imagining of what the perfect audiobook would be. And I haven't done it. Right. Because it becomes undoable, right? The searching for perfection doesn't lead me to perfection. It leads me to stagnation.
Paralysis. So absolutely. It just stops you dead in your tracks.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I got plenty of examples like that, right? Where just start where you're at, is an expression we hear. And that's a better approach to sobriety. Do it and move on, and it isn't a cop-out. It's a legitimate way of approaching life and recovery.
Well, let me just say one of the things that I've been relearning. You notice. I mean, I think all of us here can identify with the fact that we're not. When was the last time we learned anything new? It's like we just keep relearning the shit that we had and we forgot, and it's like. But one of the things I've been getting, and I think it has something to do with age as well as just paying attention and doing this work with Alan and Patrick, is that the. I don't know if it's the opposite of, but I think it's the remedy for perfectionism is just practice. We work with so many metaphors and so many concepts, and we get so excited about the words we can put together. I do anyway, and do that. But the idea is being present in the moment, doing whatever is in front of me right now, and only doing that, being completely focused there. It's not a concept to be explored. It's not a metaphor. It's the fucking solution. It's like when you say, why do the steps? To practice, just to do the steps. Why did I just feed the horses at the barn? That's what I'm doing. Why am I sitting here talking to you? And it's offensively simple. And I think one of the things I've run into is I think I get offended. My little brain gets offended at how simple this stuff is, but it really is that simple, isn't it?
Exactly. And I tend to complicate things. So perfection, self-improvement sort of opens the door to my perfectionism. And that's not a solution for my life. And Alan's so kind, really. I love what you said about, sober enough. Well, I like your chapter. What was it? Chapter 9 or 10 or something like that on, dealing with perfectionism. And I liked everything in there. That was fighting perfection enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's so interesting because this term, like sober enough, reminded me of, there was this movement in I think it was probably the 60s, but I'm not exactly sure. So Bruno Bettelheim, who was a developmental child psychologist, right, and talked a lot about a lot of different things, just saw how many parents were suffering from this idea of having to be a perfect parent.
Yeah.
And he came out with this term for them. The goal here is to be a good enough parent, not a perfect parent. And I'm telling you, that liberated. I mean, it was like D-Day in France, right?
Yeah.
I mean, which I
war
love.
is over.
I love. Well, it just opened up. It opened up this whole part of the consciousness that said, "Wait a minute, let's just figure out if we're just being good enough, right? Let's just see what that means to do and let go of this burden of doing it perfectly. Because like you said, as soon as I put this curse of perfection into my consciousness, it creates paralysis, stagnation, second guessing. I mean, oh my goodness gracious me, we can sit there and look at something from 1,000 different things. And I'm sure you happen to experiences like I did. I'd write a sentence and then I'd look at it and then I'd rewrite it again. And then I'd rewrite it. After about 50 iterations of that, I'd come back and write it the same way I wrote it the first time.
Right.
It was like I didn't improve it. I just totally got caught in this thing that it's got to be perfect, you know? Yeah. And I've suffered that and I suffered that. But this good enough idea was so liberating. And for me, when you brought it into that discussion, when we did that emotional sobriety workshop with John through Free Thinkers in AA, I felt that liberation in my own personal recovery. I'm saying, you know, that's the goal here, man, is just let's make it good enough. And what does good enough mean? So I'd like to have that discussion a little bit with you guys, right? So when we say good enough, what are we talking about? And each of us, there's 4 of us here. Right. Let's all chime in on that. What does good enough mean to you guys?
Well, let me say, first of all, the idea, I love the fact that you describe the response, that big shock response you get when somebody says that. It's unfortunate that we are such a perfectionistic culture that's shocking. It really is. It really it's so telling.
Right, isn't it? But it's almost like it's settling. See, I think that was one of the things that it meant.
No, that's the thing.
It's not. It's like
this is where. Right, where the words. This is where I love the play with words, because the words in that case, are really attention getters. One I've used with clients a lot that always kind of gets them to do a double take, and you and I have talked about it quite a bit, Alan, is what I call the power of lowered expectations. Yeah. And then they think I'm joking at first because it's a good guess with me, but I say, no, I'm serious. Let's talk about the power of lowered expectations, and once people can get that, and it's exactly what you're talking about, Joe, is like the idea is, if there's 15 steps to the first landing of the staircase, you don't hit the landing in the first step. It's like, we don't even consider it. We walk up the damn steps. But when we come to having a creative idea or something we're supposed to do, or we have some message about that, it's like, no, we're supposed to hit that landing. Or if not, we're supposed to come back down and start all over again. And we wear ourselves out. So, I guess that's my take on that. Is the idea is, I think anything we do to help people understand that true recovery from, in my use of the word recovery is not just about addiction. It's about recovering from what's toxic and recovering who we are. True recovery is about being realistic. Yeah. And
that's emotional sobriety, isn't it?
Yeah.
Going from being perfectionistic to realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the way I've said it at times is thinking about being aligned to reality, because that's what being realistic means, is a certain alignment to the experience we're having instead of being at odds with it. But yet for me, though, that interest in that concept of good enough before, I had this other part of me that developed that saw it another way. It seemed like it was settling for second best.
Yes.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You see, that's what I was saying. Yeah. See, good enough. I see.
All
right, it's a cop-out. You can't be perfect, so you might as well just go ahead and settle for being second best. You're still a loser,
Ladies and gentlemen, silver medalist Alan Berger.
Right.
That's right. There it is. Yeah, like the silver medalist. Right.
Like the silver medal is a bad thing. It's like, I know. It's so crazy. But the idea. But it also tells us again, it's so telling about our culture, is everything's a fucking competition.
It is.
It's like we're not. This isn't a contest.
You remember the silver medalist is the gold medalist that counts.
Yeah,
that's so good, Joe. I'm a silver medalist, and I'm trying to be proud of it.
You're so ashamed. You're so ashamed.
I know, and I would be. See, it's that kind of stuff. It's like I had so much this part of me that developed that was obsessed with this idea. And even like the thought of being a silver medalist, like what, who wants to do that? I mean, see, it's that crazy thing. What was it? They attributed this quote to Vince Lombardi, but I think it wasn't him. It was George Alice said, winning isn't everything. It's the only thing.
Yeah, that's right.
It's that mentality.
And that's toxic thinking, isn't it?
Oh God.
Like, so your ethics can go because winning is everything. Your health can go because winning is everything. Your romantic life can go because winning is everything. Like it's just a horrible idea, but it's a great bumper sticker.
Well, it is, and what it does too is talk about the emotional sobriety part. It's like that's totally focused in the interpersonal world, not the intrapersonal. And what we're doing, everything about what we're talking about is self-esteem and self-identity, self-validation, self-support from the intrapersonal. It's like, I'm not competing with you from in here. When I get out there and start competing with you guys, then, you're all, I could do a number. Patrick, you and I've had conversations about our inner critics and stuff like that. I mean, if I wanted to get into a thing where I'm going to compare my intellect and my abilities and my ability to express myself with among us four, I could do a horrible number on myself. I'm choosing not to do that. I want to be a participant. I want to be a part of, it's like no medal.
Exactly. Not the leader, not the winner, the participant.
I'm happy to be here. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I feel proud of that.
Yeah. And because nobody gets out alive. Right?
That's right.
There's no way to win the game of life, right?
My mentor, Dr. Kempler, used to travel around the world. But specifically, the story I'm going to tell is he came to Pennsylvania once, and he's a family therapist, right? One of the pioneers in family therapy. And he'd do all these workshops where they bring families in for him to interview in front of a bunch of social workers and psychologists. And he was out here in Pennsylvania, actually, interviewing some of the families of the workers that were in the coal mine. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget this one family that he interviewed. He sat there and he said to the father, he says, "You don't realize what a hero you are every day." And the guy looks and said, "What are you talking about? I just go in the coal mine and I come out and I do my day's work." He said, "You're a hero. Is you go ahead and put your life on the line for your family on a daily basis, with no thought for yourself, because you need to do it to support your family. You come home, you still try to be the best dad you can be. And you guys are all trying to struggle and make it." I mean, by the time he was talking, the whole audience was in tears and crying because he recognized the heroism of everyday life that every one of us have when we show up and go out and do a good enough job.
Yeah,
brilliant reframe for everybody.
Oh my
Absolutely.
God. I got goosebumps as I'm sharing this story with you guys. In this father who felt so bad about himself that he didn't make more of his life. Because here's that idea, right? I should be something more than just a coal miner, right? I should have done even more for my family. We still struggle at times. By time that interview was over, you saw this man come into his own experience with himself, as well as his wife and children. I mean, it was earth-shattering. And I'm telling you, I've seen this in the program. I was out here at a meeting once, and somebody was celebrating their 20th birthday, and the guy was sharing about how great his life is. He got his job back, and he's driving this Audi now, and and he's making all this money and stuff like that. Now, my sponsor, Tom, who was out here, and, he raises his hand to share. He says, I'm really concerned because we're setting up this program as though it means you're going to be successful and that you have to be successful to be in recovery. He says, for me, being in recovery is freedom. It's freedom from whether you're successful or not, because there's many people sitting in this meeting right now that are never going to have that experience. They're not going to be driving an Audi. They're not going to be doing this. And if they measure their recovery on these kinds of ideas, they're going to always feel less than. He says recovery is about being free from our desire to drink and use today. He says it's free from some of this emotional garbage that goes on in our head, the toxicity and stuff like that. He says that's what we need to be measuring our recovery on, is our freedom, not how much money is in our bank account. It was, wow, man, you could hear a pin drop in the meeting.
Yep. Yeah, it's just it's one of those things where you look at it from this angle and everything's different.
Yeah, that's right.
The only person I should be in competition with is the person I was yesterday, which I think
Love it. Love that.
tracks.
Mhm.
I find words and sort of symbols that help free me from this. Like, for instance, I don't want to be an example of recovery. I want to be a sample of recovery.
Love
Here's
it.
one way to do it.
There you
Yeah.
go.
That's
Here's what could turn out, right?
I
You
love
know,
it, Joe.
Where, like I don't want to be, any above or below anybody, right? I just want
You're
to
right,
be-
because it's funny because you think about the connotations. When you say example, watching your hand move, when you say example, we elevate ourselves.
Yeah.
Or whoever we're talking about. We don't. Yeah, we don't. It's like no. It's like that's what's the best compliment any of us ever get when we're in our working environment, working with other people, is when you realize whatever they're saying, they understand that not only they get it that we're not distinguishing ourselves from them, but that they don't distinguish themselves from us.
Right.
See, because I'm uncomfortable with the one when people are saying, "Oh, you're so," it feels like they're elevating me as that example of saying, "Oh, you see yourself as no, I'm not among the the other people. It's like I am. We just are all here." It's not, we are the same. It's like, to humility. I always say humility is, I talk about negative arrogance as well as arrogance, and humility is that common meeting ground where I am neither better nor worse than anybody.
Yeah.
That's home base.
Yeah. That's right.
And some of these things are baked in. We talked earlier about like the four absolutes of the Oxford group, where, striving for these impossible to reach ideals is baked into our society, in terms of you can never be thin enough or rich enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I try to treat everything as a range instead of a binary success or failure. When I think about my day's efforts. And it makes it a lot easier than this do or die James Bond moment where I've got to talk to this person. And if I don't say the right words, it's, I'm a dead man, right? No, stumble through it, do it good enough. And, and you can come back and change, right? Life isn't, about getting it perfect. It's about trial and correction, right? Forget the errors and the wins, right? It's just, I'm always self-correcting.
Yes.
Absolutely. I was working with a client this last week, and she has a real hard time just landing and staying in any one place, both physically and mentally, for any length of time. And I handed her I have a stack of notebooks that a friend of mine who used to write incessantly left to me when he died. He died suddenly, but he had a whole stack of these empty composition notebooks. So I have them in my office, and we'll give them to clients at certain times. And I just I'll be arrogant enough to title them for him. So what I wrote on her notebook was, on the cover, was problems and solutions. And I said, what you write in here is just, because she talks problems all the time, but she doesn't think or write problems in a way that create the opportunity for solutions. You got to learn how to define, because what you're talking about is problem definition. This is how we move through life. It's like at the end of this talk, I've got a problem. I'm upstairs in my house and I need to go downstairs. Okay. I need to solve that problem. It's like, I won't think of it that way, but we're just problem solving all day long. And it's because we're getting from where we are. And if we can think that way, so that a problem is not something, again, to or that we even get to judge it. Earlier, when you said you were talking about your music projects, and I had a little moment of gratitude for myself, because I realized my brain really has been retrained to think about things so differently in some ways. And it's like when you said that there were several of these music projects that didn't go anywhere. The guy on my committee, the first one that spoke, says he doesn't know that, because, and I'm not talking about the projects. I'm going, we don't know how those took you to the next thing and to the next thing and the next thing. We don't have any information about what those projects did or didn't do.
Yeah.
And it's like, I was so happy that just spontaneously shows up as opposed to the ones that used to spontaneously show up, which usually just said, "Hey, Tom, you're a fuckhead." Okay. Thanks for reminding me.
You're a musician. I write films and I make films, and my perfectionism comes in, I've noticed, when I watch a really good film or I read a very good screenplay, and I recognize the enormous gulf between this thing I've just experienced and loved and what I just created. And I just feel like pulling my hair out, and I feel like that is another vector of perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you grapple with that in the music world?
Well, I see a lot of these successes that I admire as being components of many things: talent, hard work, and dumb luck. Right. Like the fickle finger of fate, right, sometimes has an effect on sweeping one band into notoriety and another band remaining in obscurity. And so you got to love the effort, because the results aren't guaranteed. Right. Just I can eat a plant-based whole food diet and still get cancer. Right. It improves my chances. It's a good way to live now, but it's not. It's not a guarantee. And I do that. I go, well, I can't rip off leads like Jimmy Page does, so why bother, right? Again, perfectionism doesn't drive me to self-improvement. It stagnates me into numbness, right? It's very defeating, this perfectionism. And that you also have to compare yourself to their journey. Dolly Parton's written over 400 songs, right? Probably 4,000 songs, right? So she has a hit song, but I had a chance to listen to the Beatles' early recording of My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
It was awful in terms of it was no better than any other garage band. Right. Like it was humble beginnings. Yeah. Right. And that's how they started. But, like I just look at, wow, how could I write a song like Maybe I'm Amazed? Or how could I write a song like Hey Jude? Right. Or Cold Turkey, like what a perfect song about,
And then, now we get to listen to some of those recordings where they're in the studio trying these songs on first and doing a run, and before they really polish it, right? Which is amazing. I love it, because it just shows you that evolution in terms of even what happens with a song. I mean, it was incredible the other day. I forgot what tune I was listening to, but they were practicing it, and trying to get a sense of what it is. And through the experience, like you said, it's trial and improvement, right? Trial and correction, trial and having it become what it can be. And there's no way of there's no other way than starting with where it is for you right now. Wherever
right. The thing we're getting that Roger on Thursday night keeps bringing up too is acceptance is the first step of change. It's and Patrick, I just want to jump in here real quick, because there's two things I'm thinking about when you say that, because I identify with that so much in terms of the comparison. I remember before I published my first book, I came to a friend of mine and I'd just been in a bookstore. Remember those bookstores? And I'd been in the big bookstore in Nashville, and we had I went to the self-help group section and just looked at this and was just feeling overwhelmed. And I said to her, I have nothing new to say. I have nothing to say that anybody has not already said. And she this is a good example, Alan, of where she was clever and words got my attention. She said, well, of course you don't, and I was like, what? I thought, and she said this, and I always hung on to it. She said, but there are people out there waiting to hear it just the way you're going to say it.
Yeah.
And I think that's true for your craft, any of our craft. I think it is. And the other thing I'm remembering is there was a novelist. He wasn't hugely successful. His son is actually a little bit more successful maybe than him. He is Richard Speight Sr. Richard Speight Jr. is an actor that many people know, but Richard Speight Sr. was a novelist here in town. Was very kind to me when I was first starting out, and he wrote me a little poem. It's on my wall in my office, and it just says, "Talent is nice, skill is okay, but in the end, persistence pays." And I just love that. That was just such a gift for me. And I remember it with everything I do. It's, because I look at the successful people, because I live in Nashville. I live in a town where I promise you the most talented people are not the most successful people. They're just not. It's like sometimes those kinds of things coexist, but they're not. It's a combination of that stuff. And the truth is, it is those people who do. How do you succeed? Well, you don't quit. And the way I say it is, I'm going to achieve my bestseller dreams. I'll either achieve them or I will die trying. And either one of those will leave my integrity intact at my funeral. So you can come and say, boy, that guy was wildly successful with his book sales. Or you can come and say, that motherfucker never stopped trying. And either one's okay with me. I would prefer the first one.
And if it's for a feeling of worth, am I worthy? Right?
Yes.
Do I have a world record? Even if I get a world record, it'll be broken.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't sustainable, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I try to measure my efforts because one of the things I am is notoriously poor at judging time. Oh, I'll just write this blog. It'll take a couple hours and I'll get on with the rest of my things. And it's a 2.5 week project, right? So I slot time for I will put effort into this during these hours, because what happens is I planned on doing X at 1:00, but I'm still in the middle of doing Y. So I can't do X. Now I'm stealing from Peter to pay Paul. Mm-hmm. So I slotted time for X, and then I'll do Y. And so I can do that, but I can't, I'm no good at being realistic about how long things will take.
Me neither. 2.5 was something, I guess. You weren't that far off.
And Patrick, be sure people are reading what you have some readers. And everybody, you don't need everybody's damn opinion, but you need somebody to give you some feedback, because what Alan was talking about writing the sentence, one of the things that I learned a long time ago, better at it now, but that should monster in my head was going to edit and rewrite every sentence I was writing, and it breathed down my neck. And I had to basically get to a place where I disqualified my own opinion about what I was working on at the time and trust it to somebody that I knew would tell me the truth.
Well, we did. We need a muse. I told you the value that Vince, Hyman has brought to my writing and my work. He's just, the guy's phenomenal. But Joe, I'm just sitting here appreciating you so much. It's so nice to have you with us, and I love the conversation with you, man. You're very, very thoughtful about life, and I love how you challenge. That's the rebellion dog in you, man. I love your rebellion dog. You have a great rebellion dog. I mean, it challenged some of the things that we just accept as the reality, and they aren't the reality, right? There's such a social construction of reality and personal construction of reality. And like you said earlier, man, I mean, my ability to create illusions is phenomenal. I mean, it really goes. I'm like right up there with the best science fiction writers of all times in my personal life.
Lots of practice. Yeah.
It's hard.
And if only we were programmed to see these things positively. Like, let's say someone walked into their first recovery meeting and said, where do I start? Well, what are your skills? You seem to be able to get drugs no matter what, even if you have no money or no connections. You know, let's use that skill. What are your other skills, right? And just sort of we meet ourselves where we're at, and we just utilize what we're good at, as opposed to what are the barriers, what am I failing at.
That's right. And that's that persistence thing that Tom talked about, man. I'll tell you, man, just that stick-to-itiveness, man. If there's one thing like you've done, I've done in my program, that no matter what, we keep showing up. And even when we're, for me, it's been when I've had the darkest of nights, I haven't thrown in the towel on those times, that I've just somehow found a way to endure them. And with some sense of that there will be some meaning at some time to this. I can't find it right now, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to discover it.
Yeah, letting go that insight is a present tense. I mean, hindsight is where the best insights are. I mean, it's almost like insight in the present tense is just recreational at best, and really gets in the way at worst. Thinking that I'm going to figure all this out while it's happening. You're not. It's like, we could all tell a story about ourselves today, right now, and it'd be okay. We figure some stuff out. But if we came together and made a deal, and we did a study where we did this over a period of time, where we said, now let's meet 6 months from now and tell a story about this time of our life, it's a different story. Because we don't have the perspective. We're the left tackle, on the football field rather than watching the films. I mean, it's like all I know is I got to either knock that guy down or he's going to hurt me, right? And it's like, so, but I want to go back before I don't know where we are exactly, but before we go, I need to say I have a favorite part of this conversation, and for some reason, it's this, Joe. It's the how you came to write the daily reflection book, and I just love. I'm a fan of the idea of being somebody who is spontaneous enough to start sentences that I have no idea how they're going to end, whether I'm writing them or speaking them, and and I do that. It's like I do not know often how they're going to end, and it's like. And I realized what you said earlier was that you wrote that book because somebody asked you about that, and you were confidently getting ready to explain to them why you were not the one to write the book, but you didn't have an ending to the sentence. So you wrote the book. It's That's great. I love that.
Integrity, right?
So Joe, listen, tell our listeners how they can learn more about you and where they can get your book and all those other goodies.
Oh, there's lots of stuff you can get for free too. Like I happily give it away, right? At rebelliondogspublishing.com. There's links to blogs and podcasts and other people's, my book and other people's books. Anything I find I want to share with people. And isn't it easier to promote somebody else's achievements than your own, right?
Yep.
Like I just find more joy in doing that. And and I'm accessible. People are stunned. My phone number is in the book, and they call and I answer and I talk to them, and they're taken aback by that. But I'm not always available to answer the phone, but let's talk.
And when does the North American tour start for the band?
Well, I have to plan every stop, and I have to get the right roadies.
Last thing before the sign off, we have a question from social media. How may emotional sobriety affect those who are affiliated with cults?
Wow.
Just speaking of what I spoke to, the whole idea of cultism is fundamentalism, is perfectionism, is like an ultimate carrot that can't be reached. And you sort of fall into that, and you're never going to be satisfied, and you're going to be desperate and susceptible to compromising your values. And so a little bit of what we're talking about here, I don't know who wrote it and what their circumstances are, right? And deprogramming takes a certain amount of therapy, but small c cult, like some groups are culty, and some approaches are culty. You can assuage that with just that sort of good enough thinking, right?
Well, and look, what you're also talking about. Look, how many times have you heard AA being, accused of being a cult?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing. It's that there's these ideas that people accept uncritically as an answer. And, if you want to define cultism, that's what it's about. I'm going to suspend any of my personal reaction and judgment to this, and I'll let somebody else tell me the way things are, the way things should be. And then I'm going to try to adopt that as part of my life, because that will be the solution. Because obviously I'm not able to discover it. And see, it's to me, that's at the heart of emotional sobriety, Patrick, is this idea that I need to include myself, right, into this process. Nobody's coming. I'm not going to find the solution out there. The solution's going to be coming from my, as we've talked about in this, taking a bite of that, chewing it up and saying, how does this work for me? Is this being nourishing? Do I see myself thriving with this? Or is this, I don't like it. It's not nourishing me. It's not nurturing me and becoming who I want to be. See, those are the kinds of things, but it's including yourself. It's interesting the way I started to talk about this last week. I was inspired by something Dr. Bowen said. Tom, you weren't there Thursday night, and I threw this idea out that, and I'm modifying it a little bit from what Dr. Murray Bowen said, but he said he was talking about differentiation, and I just applied it to emotional sobriety. Emotional sobriety is being able to stand for yourself without being selfish, and be able to act for others without being selfless.
Love that. Love that.
Stand for yourself without being selfish, and act for others without being selfless. So, we talk about balance all the time in terms of this thing. And I hope people can hear the balance that I hear it in that statement, right? Is we're trying to balance those two things all the time in our life. And I think that's what emotional sobriety is me being involved in with that foundation of humility that we talked about earlier.
I would guess that anyone, deeply involved in a cult has lost that sense of self.
Totally.
Well, that's the cost. That's what they collect on the front end. But Patrick, for future reference, and I love what Joe's saying about the big C's and the little C's with the cult. It's like I think it'd be really good and fun to go back and look at this question some more sometime as we go along, because it's really a challenging question because in a way you're saying, okay, we have some things here that we think are that can be very effective, but that when you talk about something that is cultish like that, you go, that's a big challenge. I don't know if it's the ultimate. I started to say that, but maybe it's a big challenge. It's like it really does challenge us to say, okay, how might we apply that? I think there's things to learn from kind of putting something to the test, even just in our discussion about that. Maybe we can talk Joe into coming back and talking with us.
As a final word, I'd say we've podcasted enough. We have to respect Alan's time.
I've got to run, you guys. But Joe, look, please, can we invite you back? Yeah. And continue some of these discussions with you. And please, everyone, pick up Joe's, connect with Joe and his work and stuff. I'm certain it's going to add to your life.
Sure. If you don't like my book, I'll find you one you do like.
Where else can you get that, right? Where else can you get that? All right, you guys. Wonderful show today.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Tom. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for being here. See you guys later.
Tend your life. Tend your myth. Cultivate your narrative with whomever you're with. Then with glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories. Bring your stories back to me. It ain't a crime to be a human. Never be ashamed to be yourself. Rest assured that whatever you're doing will entertain me like nobody else. So here's to us, my old friends, and until it's time to drink the wine and break the bread again. With glass in hand and children on one knee. Bring some stories, bring your stories back to me.